Okay, so we're going to start right now in a review of Seifim. Well, we're not going to do every one that I mentioned. We're going to skip around a bit. Okay, so let's start with subsection 16. Very important sif. In subsection 16, we learn a rule, which is that you need to understand what you are truly obligating yourself in doing. Okay, so we're going to see how this will play in Alachaim. Alachaim, when a person makes a kinyan, we'll get into that towards the end of the sif. But the first part of the sif gives us a very important rule. So what does this rule say? The rule tells, I'm going to just take out the volume, but if you want, you can put it on at any point. All right, so the rule says like this. Well, the Rebbe tells us that it is very possible that a person can make a kinyan, can make an acquisition to obligate himself in a contract, and it still will not have any halachic binding power. This is because if a person makes a kinyan after saying, I will give such and such, it does not mean anything. What does that mean? If a person says, I'm going to sell you this item. I'm going to sell you this pen for $10. And I'm going to make a kinyan that I'll lift up this handkerchief to allow that the pen will sell for $10. Or I'm going to give you as a gift this pen, and I'm going to lift up this handkerchief as a kinyan sudar to make sure that it takes place. The halacha, the dry halacha, is that it doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything. Right? So again, when a person makes, we learn in subsection 16 a very important rule. A person says, I'm going to give a gift. I'm going to sell you this. And they lift up a handkerchief or something to make it happen. It doesn't do anything. Why not? Why is it not effective? The answer is because kinyan, an acquirement, we learned, last time we were learning about, which page was it? I'm going to pull up the page. We learned the source of the kinyan sudar. It's learned out by the book of Ruth, how it says that in the olden times, they would take a shoe and they would lift up the shoe, and that would be the form of showing that they want to make the acquisition take place. And okay, but that does not work. Even if you do a kinyan, it doesn't work in every case. So what is a case that it doesn't work on? If it's only a verbal expression of saying, I will sell you, I will give you a gift, and then they do the kinyan, it doesn't work. What do you need to do? You need to make a kinyan on the transaction as it takes place. You can't make a kinyan on words, on a verbal promise. Now, there's a side issue about when you make a promise, you should fulfill your promise. But if you don't, Beis Din cannot enforce you to do it. So let's say someone goes to Reb Tzvi Rao and they say, Reb Tzvi, I'm going to give you $1 million for the Mashiach campaign. You go, amazing. And they make a kinyan. But then they say, you know what? I don't have that much money. Let me change my mind. So could Tzvi take them to Beis Din and then say, hey, you have to pay the $1 million commitment? I don't know. Maybe you could. But the general idea is that you would probably lose. Why would you lose? Meaning they couldn't obligate the guy to give. Because they would say that the halacha, they quote this sif in the Alter Rebbe, that if a person says, I'm going to give a gift, and they make a kinyan on it, it's only words. Now, there is sometimes by tzedakah organizations, maybe it could be effective or stronger than a regular individual person, but the general idea is that someone says, I'm going to give you $1 million here, I'm making a kinyan on it. It's only a kinyan on words. Words is not tangible. It has no legal effect. And that's what I wrote over here. This is because a person cannot make a kinyan on words. Rather, a kinyan is only effective on the transferring of an object. So the question is, and that's what the Alter Rebbe talks about in Sif subsection 16. So then what do you need to do? How then does a person bolster their future verbal commitment? So that's what we learn right now. Let's see if I can go down to the next page properly. So how does one accomplish the future acquisition of an item? So Alter Rebbe gives us two rules. Very simple. These are rules that they're not for a dayan and a beis din. He put these halachas here for every business person every person making a transaction, every layman, and rabbis as well, right? So number one, he says this is done when a person uses an expression that he accepts upon the obligation upon himself. In Hebrew, the word is mischayev al nafshay. Person is mischayev al nafshay. He says, I obligate my soul to this. I obligate myself to fulfill my word. So then, by just adding those few words, I'm obligating myself, then even if he only made a verbal commitment, but he makes a kinyan, he says, Ani mischayev al nafshi. I am obligating upon myself that I'm going to give this as a gift in 30 days from now. It'll be effective and it'll have to be fulfilled. If Tzvi has somebody goes over and says, I'm going to give you the $1 million for making a Mashiach campaign. So Tzvi, what do you need to do? You need to go, okay, you're making a kinyan, take this and add the following words. I am obligating upon myself. Then if we go to Basin, you would win. You would get the $1 million. Whereas if it was just without those words, it wouldn't be effective. Very important. And when they're writing it on a contract, they could write those words in. It will be very important. Last week, by the way, we learned about different wordings and expressions that are very important and effective for making the contract be real and not fake. What were some of the sorry about that. What are some of the expressions that we used last time? So let's go back to that for a moment. We used, no, that's right. Yeah, we spoke about the difference of a loan, which is an oral loan, and a written loan, right? A written loan is a documented loan that gives the ability that you can acquire from people who you have a lien on their property. So any loan that took place afterwards would be, you could have a lien on their property, right? And we said that even if you do a kinyan sudar, once you do a kinyan sudar, that allows the witnesses to be able to document the loan, right? Sorry, let me just go back, control, put them back in. Sorry, just trying to make the screen bigger again. Oh, it's right here on the bottom. Sorry, just put that in. Zooming on Zoom. Okay, so we went on to say that there is all types of expressions which are helpful when they're being made. Okay. So for example, if a person says, I did a kinyan in front of Beis Din Chashuv. I did a kinyan in front of a valuable court that that this should take place. So even if it didn't take place, it's okay. We said it's still valid. It's still legitimate. And the reason is based on the Gemara in Gittin that says that any time there is an admittance by a person who is a litigant, it's considered similar to 100 witnesses testifying. So if a person says, I did a kinyan in front of Beis Din Chashuv that this should all be legal and valid, then yeah, it will be, even if it's not true, because that's similar to the rule that a person, you know, he says it's, I admit that I did this, I'm obligating on myself something. So it's like, I admit, it's like 100 people are testifying the same thing that I'm saying. So that's what we were doing last time. Now we're showing in this Sif 16 that it's important that a person uses the expression "Ani mischayev al nafshi." I am obligating upon myself that, and therefore the verbal commitment will be binding, or if it's written on a document. Alternatively, the altar brings another option. If a person obligates himself,
question.
Yeah.
Quick question. When you say subsection, is that like the siman? Is that a siman?
Subsection is usually, they translate that as the sif. So the laws of edus we're learning right now, testimony and contracts, and the subsection is the sif. So right now we're learning sif yud tezayin, which is subsection 16. That's how the English Shulchan that's how they translate the sif, and they call it subsection.
It's section, then it's section in English. No?
Well, it makes sense, but
That's subsection. I
I
don't know.
started using it, the expression, because it's their expression.
But I'm saying each one is a Simmons. The Lebanon is a Simmons.
No,
Simmons.
each one is a sif. A sif, it's called. A simon is usually like a whole chapter.
On here on the translation, they Simmon Tesu Yud Gimel. Allah Zava. So it seems.
I'd have to look again. I thought it was always saying subsection. I have to look
No,
again.
it says the Simmon here. It says sections. That's where
I'll
you
look at.
something.
All right, I'll look at that again.
Okay,
They
anyway,
call on the top. They call it sections. All right.
look at it. It says sections, 9 to the section. That's
All right. Well, I will look at that again.
that section, right?
Usually in the footnotes, when they say, we learned in subsection. That's what in the footnotes that's how I see them doing it. But okay. In any case, another option.
That you really mean the Simmon or the seat.
If like Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, that's what I mean. Okay. Now, and alternatively, if a person obligates himself to transfer ownership of an item from now, which means Me'achav, that's also effective. So that means that retroactively the transfer really took place right now, even though that the poil in actual practice, you're only going to get the gift in 30 days from now. So let's say a guy says, I am going to give you this golden pen Me'achav in 30 days from now. So you're saying that in 30 days from now, that's when the golden pen will actually be given to you. But the giver is saying, and he's writing on the document, consider it like you got it this second. However, there's a technical difficulty that you need to wait 30 days for it to take into effect. So if you write on a contract, you say Ma'achshav from now, that's also going to be effective, because then it's not words. It's not that you're giving your word. You already gave it. The word from now makes as if the gift has been given, and then it's effective. But you have to technically wait the contract or the term or the condition. So that's another effective tool. But what if you didn't do me'achshav? And what if you didn't say, I am obligating upon myself? So then the Alter Rebbe in Sif Tezayin goes on to explain the whole concept of avart. Avart is a known, Bezras Hashem, you guys should make avart very soon. Avart is a lachayim, also called, avart. Avart in Yiddish means a word. So it's the engagement party, a simple little engagement party. So where did you get this word from? So I once read an article written by Rabbi Ashkenazi Alav Hashalom from Kfar Chabad. He wrote a little booklet that he gave. I was at his son's wedding when they had like a little chura. So he wrote all these Chabad customs and the reasons behind it. So what I'm saying right now, I'm basing on what he said. But first, before that, what does the Alter Rebbe write? So the Alter Rebbe goes on to say that he didn't say olden times, but I will say that in olden times it was common that they would make a shtar tanoim, that your person would be engaged, maybe it was a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year. They would write a whole contract out, and it would say the chassan's obligating himself to get this money for the wedding, and the kala's side is giving this money towards the wedding, and it'll say that if this side backs out, then they're going to pay this big fine of like thousands of rubles. And if the kala's side backs out, they're going to pay a fine of thousands of rubles, and they would sign it, and the chassan would sign it, and the side of the kala would sign it. If not, the kala or her side would sign it. And again, as I said, it spelled out the various knasim, the fines that each side would take upon themselves if they back out of the wedding. There was expenses, plus they didn't want people breaking up a broken engagement. So it would also mention that, as we said, the penalties. On a side note, it doesn't say in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's well known that in Lubavitch, it's not a custom they do. Maybe, I don't know if it was done in the past. It's definitely not done today. You don't write a contract before during the engagement party or in between the time of the engagement towards the wedding. We don't do that. Rather, the poil, what they do is they make the contract on the day of the wedding. Right before the chuppah, they just have a simple Tanayim contract that's filled out. And you know what? If it's not done, it's still kosher. because it's basically saying that if you back out before the wedding, the chassan will have to pay a knas. If the kala will back out before the wedding, she has to pay a knas. But guess what? They're getting married within 1 hour. So what are the chances of them backing out from the time they sign those documents till the marriage? I mean, it might happen, but it's very rare. Extremely rare if it's going to happen right on an hour before the wedding. So therefore, they do it right then and there, but they don't do it before that. Okay. So, but what you will notice though, so then the Alter Rebbe goes on to say that why is it that they make the T'nai Machroinim, which mean the second conditions? What's the point? Why do you need to make a second set of conditions? If they make the contract in the first place, make one time 2 months before the wedding, and that'll be it. Why are they making a second one before the wedding? So the Alter Rebbe says because the first one that was done wasn't really effective. It's only maybe to allow that if one side will not get married, he'll have to pay a fine. That's what it's really for. But the last set of the Tanaim have a different effect. Okay, so that's why they want to do the last one for additional reasons. The first one is basically only to make sure that they'll try not to back out. Okay, so the question though is what you do see at a l'chaim is you see the chassan lift up some sort of handkerchief. I think this was something that took place a day or so ago, so I just took it off of some website. Everybody knows they see the chassan lift up, so it's a handkerchief, but often it's not a handkerchief. Most people don't have handkerchiefs. I actually have a few, but I got it from my grandfather. Today, very few people have handkerchiefs, so what they usually use is some sort of a gartel. A gartel is fine because it's a beged, it's a full garment. So the chassan lifts up a garment. Now, whose garment does he lift up? Usually, it's the rabbi that's arranging the vart, and the chassan doesn't say anything. The rabbi should tell the chassan what he's supposed to be doing with that. But the question is, what is the chassan thinking when he's lifting up the kinyan? He's like, oy vey, what did I do? No, chas v'shalom. No, what is he really saying? He's saying to himself, and this is what Rabbi Ashkenazi wrote in that Shura that I got, and he based this on the Alter Rebbe here. He says the chassan is obligating himself to a vart, to a word. As we mentioned earlier, technically, if you say, I obligate, so you don't say, you say, I'm going to give $1 million, and you make a kinyan, it doesn't mean anything. You don't have to give $1 million. I mean, it's not right to back out of your word, but it won't halachically make that the transaction obligates that it has to take less. Unless you say, Ani mischayev al nafshi or something like that, that could, then it would be effective. So the chassan picks up this gartel, and he doesn't say anything, but he's explained the idea that by lifting it up, he's showing an act of acquisition of kinyan that he's going to go through with this wedding, that it's going to take place. Although it's true in Lubavitch, they don't make a whole contract that's done on the day of the vart. We don't do that at all. As I mentioned, we only do it right before the chuppah. But this is to show something that people are not playing games, that they say, yeah, let's get married. Okay, I changed my mind. No, they make a kinyan. They're showing their sincerity. And that's why it's called a vart. It's only a word. It's not the same thing as he's taking upon himself some fine. Now, it's true, since we don't make fines and we don't make contracts which spell out these fines that used to be more common in other circles, or in the olden days, it was pretty popular in at least in Ashkenaz communities. It's because, and what will happen now if somebody makes a l'chaim and they make a vart and they plan a wedding day, chas shalom, they break it. It doesn't end up happening because the girl breaks the wedding date. She calls it off. She has cold feet, or the chassan breaks the wedding. He found out something on her. He doesn't want to get married. No. So then, is there any fine that they have to pay? No, because in our circles, we don't make a contract before the wedding. We do one like an hour before the wedding. That's it. So as long as you didn't make any contract, you don't have to pay any fine. However, you did put your word onto your kinyan that the chassan does, so it would be, not good, be a little improper to go against your word. So it's interesting when we look in the Shulchan Aruch, in the law, I think it's in chapter 50, in Even Ezer, it's brought down in the Biur HaGra. The Gra writes, interesting, fascinating thing. He says it's better to call off it's better to get married and divorced than to break a l'chaim from your commitment. Why does he? I mean, it's a pella. Not everyone holds that way, but the Biur Gra writes it. Why does he say that? Because apparently there was some mystical idea that if you break a l'chaim before going through and getting married, you would have been better off getting divorced because you're causing some sort of kpeda, extra particular anger roused above you because of this. So if chas v'shalom it does need to take place, so then it is very strict to break off a wedding plan, and if it happens, heaven forbid, one should consult a rav. Usually, one does what's called a shtar mechira. This is written out by the Nachla Shiva was a very famous sefer that was published in the 17th century. He was a talmid of the student of the Taz, Reb David Alevi from Krakow, from Poland. Okay, and he wrote all these contracts which are used to selling chametz, a Kesubah wording, the Kesubah for a second marriage, or Kesubah to marry a divorcee, or marrying a woman who's a giyaris, or marrying a woman who's an almana. There's different wordings. Each Kesubah has different wordings. So he has all these different contracts, and it's an official contract guide that rabbis will use. So he says that what happens if you break off a l'chaim? So you need to make what's called a shtar mechila. And he doesn't explain how you write up this contract, but basically what some of the poskim say is that you need to write that both sides are giving full forgiveness to each other, and that they're removing any kapeda, any anger or any issues against each other. The Rebbe actually wrote an interesting letter that he, just like we know that by a shtar mechila, one should, by broken engagement, in order to remove any spiritual kapeda, any anger up above on us, we want to get a mechila from each other. That's why they would make a contract. So the Rebbe says that even by a get, by a divorce, the Rebbe said that the couple should just make sure there's mechila. They move on. If you move on, but you get mechila, so that they shouldn't be any kapeda, any anger or so up above. There was actually an interesting incident where there was a woman who had very difficult time getting. She got married, and she finally got pregnant, and she had a miscarriage, and she would keep on getting miscarriages. So they wrote to the Rebbe, what should they do? And apparently, I believe the Rebbe wrote that the husband had originally had a broken engagement with his first kala, and that he should ask mechila. He should make sure he never arranged the mechila with his original kala, that he broke off the l'chaim with her, and there was a kapeda, and that's why they weren't zocha to have children after many years. She would have a ton of miscarriages. So after they arranged mechila by the Rebbe's instruction, his wife immediately had a pregnancy, which lasted, and of course was a healthy child, of course, right after that. So that's just a side point regarding the importance of what the Vart really carries. It carries a very serious, it's sincere, and it's not something to take lightly. Okay, now in subsection 18, it's a very interesting rule. We learn about the invalidation of what's called a shtar mukdam. A shtar mukdam means a predated contract. So a person has a predated contract. It simply means like this: I lent money to Mayan on Rosh Chodesh. However, for some reason, when we wrote the contract, we didn't write it for Rosh Chodesh. We wrote it for Chaf Hei, 5 days before the loan actually took place. Now, if that contract was signed by Edim and it was written the date 5 or even a day before, the point is it was a date that was predated the actual time of the loan, that would be an invalid contract. Why? It's very simple, because we learned on Sunday.
Who wrote it? The person that's getting the money and give it as a.
Usually the people that write it, they would have the sofer write it, but it could be written by anybody technically. But the main thing is who keeps possession of the contract. So usually any contract, you want to have the person who's obligating himself sign it. That's the preferred approach. At the very minimum, even if you don't have that, you could say Reuven gave money to Shimon as a loan. It could be any contract for anything. It doesn't have to be just a loan. But Reuven gave money to Shimon, and this in date, in this city, for this amount of money. And two witnesses signed on the bottom. And then the person who will collect the money, who is owed the money, will keep the contract. So it doesn't make a difference who wrote it. The main thing is that it's spelled out all the important conditions in it. It's clear, and that it's in the possession of the person who wants to one day collect that money. So now, if I am holding that shtar, and unfortunately it was muktam, it should have said Rosh Chodesh, but it said the 27th of the month, 3 days earlier than the real time when the loan took place. That would be an invalid contract. What's the reason? Because we know that if you have, and we learned on Sunday this topic, that if you have a contract which is written and signed by Edom, so that gives you a right to collect a lien on anybody's properties. So like if I had this contract and you had sold a property on the 26th of the month, I could go to them and say, hey, why did he sell you this property? Why did he sell his car? He owes me $10,000. Okay. And this loan took place on the 25th. You sold the car. You bought a car from him on the 26th. I'm collecting the car from you, and it will work because if it's on a contract, I have a lien on it. It's everything. It becomes meshubad. It becomes collectible by my contract. Now, if it would be a verbal oral loan, that's what we learned last week on Sunday. That if it's an oral loan, you don't have that ability to collect from sales, and only what you have, what the guy has right now, nothing in the past. Okay, so therefore we said how important it is to have a contract, but you can't write a contract without the agreement of the borrower. He has to know that he's getting a contract because he might not agree to take a loan if it's going to be documented. So then you say, okay, you don't want to have a documented loan, so I'm not going to lend you money. But the guy can also say, you can't make a document behind my back. I need to see and agree to it. I don't necessarily want to have the limitations of a documented loan. Okay, so then each side can choose. Do you want to do it or you don't want to do it? But anyways, that's important because what do we learn from here? Let's say you made a shtar mukdam. So we said it invalidates the shtar if it's predated because it could allow the person to collect something that didn't really belong to them. Like if you sold property a day or two before the loan, I am not allowed to collect that anymore. That's no longer in my turf. It's not in my possession to do that. I don't have lien on such property. So now the Alter Rebbe says in Sif Yurchas in 18, he says, let's say the document did not have witnesses signed on it. It was just a document without any witness's signature. So then the Alter Rebbe says it's not going to be invalid. Because the whole strength of the document is when you have witnesses signing on it. If the witnesses didn't sign to say, yes, we witnessed it and this is our signature showing this document, then there's no call, there's no voice to publicize that the loan took place. And then it really wouldn't even make a difference if it was an earlier date than the time, because once there's no witnesses signing on it, it doesn't give lien on other people's property. So that's just, so that's something important. So again, sometimes you could have the person sign on his own document. I, Reuven, owe you money. Reuven, owe money to Shimon, and I sign it. Well, there's no witnesses assigned on it. So even if it would be shtar mukdam, even if it would say an earlier date, it really wouldn't make a difference because it doesn't have witnesses signing on it. Now, if we're anyways mentioning that, we've been discussing in the past about the Kesubah, so that would be, there's a famous shaila, there's a very famous question on the Chabad custom. The Chabad custom, and there's a sikha from the Rebbe about it, is that when we write the Kesubah, we write the time of the date when the chassan makes the kinyan. Now, here's the problem. What does the Kesubah ultimately mean? It means I, the chassan, owe money to my wife if I die, chas v'shalom, or I get divorced. Now, again, if a woman initiates the divorce for no rightful means, then the chassan usually does not need to pay for a Kesubah. Because the whole purpose of the Kesubah is only when the chassan says, get out of here, I don't need you anymore. go away, old woman, and he throws her out. So Shimon ben Shatach in the Gemara Kesubah made this takana that we don't want to throw women on the streets, so we have to pay money. But what if the woman wants to throw the husband out? So then maybe the rule of Kesubah won't apply. That's a side thing. Okay, fine. But anyways, so now the Chabad custom. Okay, the Welt. What does the world do? The world usually, when I mean the world, I mean most religious circles, they make the Kesubah. And if the wedding will take place in the nighttime, even if they sign the contract a little early, let's say, but in the daytime, they might only sign it. But under the chuppah, they'll make the kinyan, and then maybe they'll finalize and sign it under the chuppah itself. So they make sure they're signing it and they're documenting. They make the kinyan of the Kesubah under the chuppah as whatever. So if it's at 8 p.m. at night, and that's when the day is the 19th of the month, so okay, then the date is good. But what if you would write the time of the date of the Kesubah? It says it took place on today is what, Tesva? Well, tonight we're going into Tezain. So let's say they got married tonight after nightfall. So really it's the 16th of Menachem Av, right? The 16th day of Menachem Av. But when they were writing the Kesubah out, it was already the sunset. It wasn't even sunset time, so they wrote the 15th of Menachem Av. So what would happen if they wrote a Kesubah, but they predated it? They wrote it even one day earlier. So l'chor, you'll say, what do you mean? It's an invalid Kesubah because it's a document which was shtar mukdam. It's predated. It means that the woman could come and bring her Kesubah and say, oh, the chassim sold a property on the 15th, and it shouldn't have belonged to you because I have the Kesubah, which is this IOU that he owes me. I have 2 witnesses signed. So I want to collect that property to pay off my Kesubah. So even if it's one day earlier, it would be invalid. So by many, they question they say, okay, you have to write the night. If it's at nighttime, you don't write the date until you're under the chuppah, and you write the date of when it took place. In Chabad, and there's a famous sikha from the Rebbe, that's not how they do it in Chabad. They write the time, like if they're writing up the Kesubah at 5 p.m., and the wedding will only take place at 8 p.m., and that means that they wrote the time of when they were writing it, which was the 15th of Menachem Av, and they're only going to make the kinyan, and they're only going to do the wedding and give the ring, etc., and give over the Kesubah on the 16th. And the Chabad customs, we still write the 15th. Question is why? Wouldn't that be an invalid, early predated contract? So the answer is no. And the simplest reason, and this is what they did by the Rebbe's wedding, and this is what they did consistently what they do in Chabad. And the reason is it doesn't always have to be because they could sometimes do the chuppah before sunset. So it anyways won't make a difference. But sometimes they happen to be that it's 4 p.m., 4:30 in the winter time, and they're only writing Kesubah after nightfall. So often, even in the Chabad custom, doesn't necessarily conflict with this problem of a predated Kesubah by a day or two, right? But the reason why, even if they wrote the 15th of Menachem Av and the chuppah only took place on the 16th, the reason why it's not invalid is because, and this is what the Rebbe explains, because we go by when the kinyan takes place. And this is what we're learning now. We're talking about when this chassan or whatever, this is the kinyan by the, this is a kinyan by the l'chaim, but there's also a kinyan that they do by the Kesubah. By the Kesubah, the chassan actually lifts up some sort of handkerchief or something to obligate himself. He does obligate himself. So the Rebbe says that when the chassan obligates himself by lifting up the kinyan, usually some item belonging to someone else, he lifts it and says, he obligate myself to what's written in the Kesubah. So we look at what time did that take place. It took place on the 15th of Menachem Av. So the Kesubah is in effect already. The Kesubah is now effective as of 15th of Menachem Av, even though the wedding will only take place, I'd say on the 16th, which is an hour or two later after nightfall. Even so, it doesn't, that's what we say. Okay, just that's an important thing to know because there are many rabbis who will say that the Kesubah is invalid if it's done that way, but that's not our custom. Our custom, as the Rebbe says, once the chassan obligates himself, he obligates himself in the Kesubah, and that's the date that we write. Okay, fine. Now, just the last thing I want to finish off on, I'm skipping a little, I'm going now to Sif 21, subsection 21. Very important rule. It's very simple. Be'ezus Hashem, anyone who needs to get married should get married soon. The Alter Rebbe in Sif 21 says that witnesses need to understand what they're signing on. Now, Rabbi Reichik came and spoke about how important it is that the witnesses need to be learned, that they can read the wording of the Kesubah, which is in Aramaic, and understand it. And many rabbis don't even understand fully all the words of the Kesubah. Especially, there's different wordings. There's a Sephardic Kesubah, which is different wordings than the Ashkenazi or the Chabad one. So if you're a few different Kesubah, so the Alter Rebbe says that any document, what we're signing, whether it's in English or in Chinese, whatever document is being signed, or in Aramaic or in Hebrew, you need to understand. The witnesses need to read the contract, understand the meaning of it, and obligate, and then only then testify by signing on it. What if they can't read and understand it? So they should not be serving as witnesses. I unfortunately do get in sometimes. So the witnesses, if they are looking, they can't get the regular witnesses usually understand the get well, and they know the meaning, tuchi to shuking, etc. They know all the wording. I mean, I know it by heart, unfortunately, by now. So, and they have to read it before they sign it. So you don't want to take just witnesses because they can't find regular witnesses. It's not good to have impromptu witnesses who don't understand the get process well, because what are they doing? They're divorcing someone as they're signing? They need to understand what that means. So, and they read it. So Alter Rebbe says that if the bare minimum, if they can't understand the contract, so then you have to have someone read and translate it to them so they'll fully understand what they're signing. They can't, as Rabbi Reichik mentioned, you can't just have two people sign a Kesubah and not understand what in the world they're doing. First of all, they have to be kosher witnesses, they have to be from, keeping Shabbos, all the mitzvahs, etc. But besides that, they need to be kosher. They also have to understand what they're signing on. The Alter Rebbe concludes in this sif that by way of initial preference, only witnesses who can fully understand the document themselves should be chosen to serve as witnesses. In other words, even if the rabbi will explain the witnesses who don't know how to read and translate the Kesubah or the get or whatever the loan document, someone will explain it to them, and that's not the initial approach. The initial approach is have the witnesses be their own translator. They understand it because they know the wording of the Kesubah. They understand what it says and how much a chassan saying he's giving or whatever, and what she's it. And it should not be that they just have to have it explained to them. In a pressing need, then okay, in a pressing need, you could have the rabbi explain to them what they're doing. It's not only by Kesubah, by any document. Okay, so and I'll just conclude with the Gemara on Gittin Daf Yud Tes 19b, and this was what we'll finish off on. Gemara there says, Eidim shein yoidim likros korin lifneim b'chosim. Gemara is talking about the difference between a contract which witnesses sign for a get and by other contracts. So the Gemara, and I'm going right into the middle of the Gemara, but it basically says over there that witnesses who do not know how to read, so then what happens is we read in front of the witnesses and we translate them, and then the witnesses can sign. And those who don't know how to sign, then one even will tear paper for them to sign on the dotted lines, as they say. Okay, fine. Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, when is this apply? That they're going to read out and translate the witness for the witnesses how to read, and even help them follow the dotted lines to sign their name. Begite nashim, by a divorce bill, so the rabbis are extra lenient to find solutions to cases when the witnesses are not fitting all the criteria that should be needed initially. But what if it was a contract which was not a get? It was a contract for a Kesubah, or freeing a slave, because freeing a slave, you need to make a contract according to the Maran Kedushin. It goes through all those laws. So im yodim, if they know likros v'lachtim, if they know how to read the contract and sign it, choismin, so we sign it. V'im lav ein choismin. If they don't know how to read and sign it, they shouldn't. So again, you see from here, the Alter Rebbe definitely is saying, don't use, and this is a Gemara, which of course was the basis of the Alter Rebbe Sif in 21, is that you should not just take random witnesses who don't know how to read the contract that they are signing on. Really, you should use witnesses who are learned, who at least understand what it says. at the bare minimum, as we said, if you don't know, so if they don't know, you could have to explain it to them. But to not have them even explain it to them and they just signed something, they didn't even know what they did, that would be a serious issue, a serious violation of the halacha that the witnesses must read what they signed on. So I guess that'll be it for today on this lesson.